Welcome to the County Compass, Columbia County's guide to news, voices, and perspectives, hosted by County Manager Scott Johnson. This podcast is your behind-the-scenes look at what's happening in county government and across our community. We'll talk about the services, projects, and decisions that make Columbia County a great place to live. We're glad you're here. Thanks for listening to the County Compass. Now, here's Scott Johnson.
Hello, everyone. This is the episode that you've been waiting for. And before we even get to the regular opening and the welcome, I just want to go ahead and get one thing on the table. Columbia County is going to be the home to one of the largest data center campuses in the United States. Google will be the sole end user and operator of that. And the reason we ever sat down at that table was not to chase a headline. It wasn't to upset our citizens. It wasn't to divide our community. It was to put Columbia County on a path for homestead property tax relief that almost no other local government in this country has even attempted to do. That's the story. It didn't start there. It didn't stay simple along the way. And a lot of our neighbors had something to say about it, as well they should. Today, I'm going to walk you through the whole story, the journey, the land, the rezoning, the public outcry, the rules we wrote, even a visit to the White House. And then on the second half of the episode, we're going to talk about the money. We're going to talk about House Bill 439, what we did to get it where it is. We're going to talk about what we've been able to negotiate, what we've been able to do, and talk about a deal with Google that puts real dollars into our general fund, which ultimately will be used for property tax relief, which was the intent. So with that, I'll say hello, everyone, and welcome to the County Compass, the county's guide to the people, projects, and progress that make Columbia County one of the best places in Georgia to live, work, and raise a family. I'm your host, County Manager Scott Johnson, and today we're going to be talking about data centers. If you've been following our earlier episodes, you already know the ground rules. We don't do talking points for talking points' sake here. Well, we explain how government works, how county government actually works, why decisions were made, and what it means for the people who pay the bills, what it means for the taxpayers in Columbia County. This episode is going to take a little longer than some, so I hope you stick there with me and go all the way through. Something tells me that my people that love the podcast, maybe the fans of the podcast, may or may not get all the way through. But I would tend to think that my detractors and the people that are upset with the county, maybe upset with me over data centers, you'll listen to every word. So buckle in. It's going to take a little longer than normal to get this done. It's not one meeting. It's not one vote. It's 2 years of working land deals, of ordinance writing, of packed auditoriums, of lawsuits, state legislation, utility negotiations, and even a trip to Washington, D.C. that I still can't believe happened the way that it happened. I'm going to tell it in order. I'm going to name the hard parts, and I'm going to be clear about what is already law, what still has to go to the voters, and how the negotiated agreement was done and what we were able to do here in Columbia County. If you live near Appling or Harlem or Pumpkin Center, those folks out there, Wright Spur Road, the White Oak area, I know you know where I'm talking about. This episode is especially for you. It's going to tell you everything that you need to know about what's going on. But if you live anywhere else in the county and you pay a homestead tax bill, this episode is going to be for you too. That's the reason we did this, and we're going to just make sure that we stay true to that. So let me start with something I've said in the studio here before, because it's the only honest place to begin. Data centers were and are coming to Georgia, whether Columbia County wanted them or not. Now, people would say, stop right there, Scott. That means you could have made them go somewhere else. But fact of the matter is they're coming to Georgia. It's a presidential initiative. We know that to be a fact, that our president wants United States data stored on United States soil. It was a initiative of our governor that wants Georgia to continue to be the number one place to do business in the United States. I think we're on the 11th or 12th year in a row that we had that. Governor Kemp has kept that going strong. Georgia Power is building generation. They are setting themselves up for the future to be able to support these things. Fort Gordon and the cyber mission already put the region on the national map. So it was just time. I say the time was probably going to come as a result of Army Cyber being here now locally. Tech probably was going to follow. Columbia County has its own broadband. We did that years ago to be able to provide internet service to our community and connect all of our government buildings and our schools. We did that with a grant. It's now a money-making thing for the county. It helps offset our general fund budget. So those are all the things that have been put into place over the years, or the things that have happened, or the strategies that have been put forth that says that, hey, they're coming. And the question was, will Columbia County residents benefit from it, or will we watch it happen somewhere else and still live with the statewide effects? Because the statewide effects are going to be the statewide effects, regardless of whether it's here or not. So could we benefit from it? In Columbia County, we chose that option. We chose the option to benefit from it. And when I say we, your elected officials, the people that are appointed in the county to carry the business out day to day, those are the people that did this. So if you're looking for somebody to blame, it's people like me that went out and tried to work this deal, but it was solely, and still today, was for tax relief for our citizens. That was the reason we did this. And we knew that if we didn't do it here, it was going to go somewhere else. We were going to miss out on that, and we may still have to deal with some of the other stuff. So, we did. We chose the first option. We chose for Columbia County to benefit. We chose it with a very specific public purpose to grow that tax base so homeowners could stop carrying so much of the load. So in Columbia County, we've talked about this before. Property taxes make up about 40% of our budget. And people just can't believe that. And if you really think about it, our all-in budget, if you look at broadband and water utility and the PAC and all of the enterprise funds, plus the TIA funds that we use to pave roads and SPLOST and all that, we spend about $450 million a year all in Columbia County, all in everything we spend. And the property tax we take in is $42 million. A tenth of what we spend every year is on the back of our property owners. Now, that's not always been the case. When I took over as county manager, we were over 67% dependent on property taxes. But we've been able to whittle that down to 42%. Again, that's just in the general fund. But if you look at what we spend globally in Columbia County, it's a tenth. Your property taxes are a tenth of what it takes to run this county. And people say, well, man, my property tax bill's so high, I just don't know how y'all do it. Where's all our money going? You're wasting it. Folks, you have to understand the backside of this. You have to understand all of it. So, the homestead owner, the small business, the storefront, the farm, the neighborhood, these are all people that are paying taxes. And for years, our board has rolled back the millage rate. We just did it again. We just rolled the millage rate back to the rollback rate. Now, folks, we did that in a public meeting. We rolled the millage rate back to the rollback rate, the lowest that we needed to go to keep the taxes equal and still be able to provide services. It's the lowest it's been in Columbia County since the late 1980s, yet we're still doing award-winning services. You know how many people showed up to applaud the rollback rate being applied or the millage rate being applied? How many people spoke about that at that meeting? I think the answer is none. Zero. Nobody showed up to talk about that. Yet when the assessments went out, social media and places like Facebook lit up with what kind of crooks we are about raising everybody's values. And people just don't understand. We've had this on the podcast before. I told you how we come up with values. It's based on the market. It's not based on us. It's based on a board of tax assessors and those employees. They don't work for the board of commissioners. We don't tell them to go out there and jack your prices up. Your prices are getting jacked up, or your values are going up because you live in an award-winning community and people want to come here and they're willing to pay to come here. And as a result, your values are going up. So government did the most responsive thing that we could possibly do. We lowered the millage rate to the lowest possible millage rate we could to be able to still provide you the service that you want. But if you compare that to any other millage rate around the state, you'll find out that Columbia County, if not the lowest in the state, is amongst the lowest in the state. Well, you haven't seen my property tax bill, Scott. You just don't understand. I completely understand. But, I'm not going to bust in an operating room and tell an orthopedic surgeon how to do knee surgery because I don't know anything about that. But, a lot of times, and I understand this because you're a taxpayer, a lot of times the taxpayers want to bust into City Hall. They want to bust into the county, government building and say, you're doing this all wrong. You're doing this all wrong. You just, you need to do things different. And you know what? Totally, you're right. As a taxpayer, as a citizen of the county, hold your government accountable. But know what you're talking about. Understand what you're talking about. Do the research and understand it, and it will go over much, much, much better. So, if we only grow rooftops, we only grow the bill. Rooftops, historically, even though a lot of you pay a lot of property taxes, rooftops do not pay for themselves historically. The amount of property taxes you pay individually on your home, even though it's a lot, is probably not enough for the amount of services that you're consuming. That's why when I say our general fund budget's $105 million, made up of $42 million of property tax money, but our all-in budget's $450 million, that other money's coming from other places. But again, we need all of that to be able to make government work here in Columbia County. So let's talk about the data center. It's not a shopping mall. It's not a subdivision. At full build-out, we're talking about multiple buildings, and I know that a lot of you are upset about this, but it's thousands of acres, and it's a multi-$100 billion investment on a very small share of the county's land, less than 3%. I've gone on record saying this. People say data centers are taking over Columbia County. When I talk about the most ridiculous thing I've heard lately, I'm going to talk about that to finish the episode. But data center zone property in Columbia County is less than 3% of the total property we have in our county. Less than 3%. We have more farmland in Columbia County than we have data center zone property. We have more timberland in Columbia County than we have data center zone property. We certainly have more commercial and more residential than we do data center. We have more industrial than we do data center property. We have more churches on property in Columbia County. Well, I don't know about that one. Collectively, maybe. But I know for a fact we have more farmland and we have more timberland in Columbia County than we have data center property in Columbia County. So they're not taking over the county. The jobs during construction, these things are real. And the long-term operating jobs, they're fewer than a factory, but they pay a whole lot more. It's a great opportunity. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What a data center does better than almost any other land use is they pay. They pay a lot. And people say, well, you're greedy, and the Columbia County is greedy. Folks, we went into this intentionally, like we do everything in Columbia County. We were intentional about providing tax relief, not intentional about making everybody upset and bringing data centers here that people didn't want. That wasn't it. Not intentional about ruining the environment or we put safeguards in place for all those things. We were intentional about bringing tax relief here. So, and if we structure the deal correctly, it's going to pay enough to take care of the tax bill. And I'm going to finish the episode with that. I'm going to give you some numbers. I'm going to give you some insight on what's been going on behind the scenes. So that was the assignment. Eliminate or get as close to eliminating as possible with Georgia law the county homestead property tax. Chairman John Duncan said it more than once. He says it loud. We went into this solely for that reason, and we stayed true to it through every single negotiation. We never gave up on property tax relief. We never backed up from that. And a lot of people saying it's not going to happen. Don't trust them. It's smoke and mirrors. Stand by. At the end of the episode, I'm going to tell you how. And as soon as we get everything in place with the law, that'll be the vessel, and it's going to be done. So let's talk about why data centers. I mean, why do we even need data centers, and why do we need them in this community? Why do we need them in America? I said the president wants them in America, wants them on American soil. Why do we need data centers? Well, we need data centers because of people like me and you. Like, you wouldn't be able to hear this podcast were it not for a data center somewhere. You would not be able to get the information that we're giving you. You would not be able to look at our YouTube channel, watch our YouTube channel. You wouldn't be able to watch our meetings being streamed live, or you certainly would be able to go back and archive them and be able to pull them up and look at all the meetings. I mean, for those of you that want to hang on every word that I say and it's wrong, go back and look at the meeting so you can pick it apart. Use a data center to do it. And that's the ironic thing about me is people that are so anti-data center will stand up so passionately and read their prepared remarks that they got either from AI or they did research on the web, which, by the way, all that came from a data center. It's extremely ironic to me. But let's talk about that. Everybody has a device. We're a high-tech society. Everybody has a device. Some of you have more than one device, right? Many of us use online banking. We use online medical records, MyChart or whatever the case may be. We stream Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and what else? Apple TV and Pluto. And I can just go down the line. YouTube TV, all the things. We stream all those things. We have Alexa in our house to order things for us. I can just simply look across the kitchen and tell my Alexa device to order something that'll then be there in Columbia County a lot of times the very next morning between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. because we have a tremendous Amazon warehouse in Columbia County. All that's going through and using data centers. We take hundreds of selfies and upload them. We take pictures of our children, our grandchildren, our vacations, right? So in short, we as a society produce 400 million terabytes of new information every single day. We're producing 400 million terabytes of data every single day. And 30% of that is Americans. Americans are doing that. So let's talk about what 120 million terabytes of data looks like. Well, if you watch high definition movies, you got on Netflix and you watch high definition movies and you wanted to consume 120 million terabytes of data, you would have to watch that high definition movie nonstop for 11,000 years. That's a big number. Now, I look, I love to binge watch Netflix too, but 11,000 years to get to 120 million terabytes of data? If you put that much data on standard hard drives, computer hard drives, that much data, and you stack them up, one on top of the other, the tower that you just stacked up would surpass the moon. It'd go past the moon. Just racks all the way up, high as you go. 120 million terabytes of data in a standard device, it passes the moon. So let's put them in a data center. When we say we put things in the cloud, we're not putting things in the sky. And I know some people are saying, well, it's going to go in the sky because Elon Musk is going to do this really soon. And it's all going to be on satellites. And you're going to have all these data centers that are taking up all this land and we don't need them. Probably not in our lifetime, probably not in my lifetime. I just don't think that's going to be the case. And there's got to be redundancy and there's got to be scalability. There's got to be reliability. I mean, there's so many things that come into play there. So I just think it's going to be a while. But if you put them in a data center, just for the 120 million terabytes, right, you need a 250,000 square foot data center. And in that data center, you'd have 7-foot tall racks completely sandwiched next to each other, side by side. And it would take 5 million hard drives of the largest enterprise servers available that are out there. It takes 5 million of those to store the data. And to power that building, you would need 150 megawatts of power, which is enough power to power about 120,000 homes. So a lot of power, 150 megawatts of power. Folks, what I just described to you is what you need to store the data that we created in America today. What about tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day? The real reason, the real way to do away with data centers is just quit generating data. Quit going online. Quit doing anything online. Quit taking pictures. Quit storing things. Quit storing data. Erase everything you don't need. Get rid of it. Go in and just get rid of all your files that you're storing and your pictures and all the things. And, you don't need all those apps on your phone. Get rid of the ones that you don't use on a regular basis. That's not what society is. We have created this. And I know some of you are still going to say, well, but why Columbia County? Why do we have to have it here? I mean, can't we just use that somewhere? Can't somebody else do that? Why does it have to be in Columbia County? And again, that's what we were talking about earlier, is assembling the deal for tax relief. So let's talk about the Development Authority and the land and all that and how it came about, because there's a whole lot of questions about that. And that's where a lot of the distrust started, honestly. And I'm not going to dance around it at all. Economic development in Georgia does not start in the commission chambers. It starts with the Development Authority. Development authorities around the state, that's their job, is to bring these economic development projects. The Development Authority of Columbia County, you also hear it called the Economic Development Authority or the EDACC. It exists for one reason in Columbia County: to assemble sites, recruit employees, and hold property in a way that the county government itself is not built to do. They are the arm that does economic development. It's their mission. It's their goal. They work closely with the county, but they are not the county. They do their own deals. We may or may not be aware of every deal they do. I'm not sugarcoating this. I'm just telling you how this works, right? The board is appointed. It's appointed by the chairman. The chairman of the Board of Commissioners actually appoints all the Development Authority board members, and then they hire their own executive director. Their meetings are public. Their job is to think in decades, not in weeks, not in months. Their job is to look at the future of Columbia County. So White Oak Business Park, they're on 221, Harlem Apple and Exit. It's already a success story. Amazon's there. Club Car's there. The park sits on the Apple and Harlem corridor, right there at 183. For years, the authority strategy has been very simple. Control the next phase of the industrial corridor so Columbia County is not reacting to somebody else's map. We didn't take every project that came out there to White Oak. We didn't take every deal. We were waiting. We were waiting for the right deal to come along. So in late 2024, the authority moved on phase 3. They took out a $30 million loan from a local bank, not from the county operating budget. The Development Authority did this. They took out this loan from a local bank, and they bought more than 1,600 acres along Morris Callaway Road, kind of the backside of that, kind of the backside of Amazon. And they bought it for a little more than $29 million. A lot of money, right? But when they did that, when they bought that, when they did that, the authority knew that they would have to pay the loan along. The authority would have to pay the interest. And I want that on the record because a lot of what's circulating in the group text and the things that are out there on Facebook and other places, they're treating like the commission, the county commission or the county manager had quietly written a check out of your property tax account to cover that property. That's not what happened. The Development Authority went and got a loan. They paid the loan. They paid the interest. They paid everything. So all of that happened in late 2024. At the same time, the Development Authority entered into a purchase sale agreement with Trammell Crow. They're a national industrial leader. They do a lot of these types of deals. But the structure was one that you use when you're recruiting a user and you can't tell the name. So you got to get the dirt under control. You got to get it entitled. You got to get it. Hopefully, you got to get it zoned. You got to make sure Georgia Power can do it. And then once that happens, all those things happen, which is what Trammell Crow did. They then control that, but the land becomes more valuable because now they've taken a piece of blank land, and if they do have it zoned for data center and they do have power available, it is worth a lot more. The property's worth a lot more. So in April 2025, a DRI, Development of Regional Impact Filing, was done with the state. And that's how a lot of people first saw the words White Oak Technology Park and the whole 8 million square feet and the whole 6 million gallons of water a day. I mean, that's what happened. I mean, that's 8 million square feet of buildings and 6 million gallons of water a day. That's enough to stop a conversation at any kitchen table. Like, whoa, what's going on? What's going on? I understand that. It stopped conversations in this building too. I'm like, hey, hold on. This may be a little too much for us. I mean, I don't really think that we need to do this and is that 6 million number for water? Is that right? And even though we have enough capacity, is that something we really want to do? And that's a lot of buildings and that's a lot of land and all the things. But we talked about it. We talked about it internally. We heard people. We heard feedback from people. In May of 2025, the commission approved the authority's request. The Development Authority owned the land to rezone about 1,900 acres from residential agriculture to S1. That's special zoning that would accommodate technology uses. Excuse me. That is one of the votes that a lot of the Western County residents still point to and say, you did this without us. You did it without input. You never should have rezoned that land. We don't want it rezoned. We don't want it used for data centers. Folks, I hear this all the time. If you don't want a piece of property rezoned, the very, very best way to make sure that it doesn't get rezoned is to buy it. And if you want to use it for trees or wildlife or whatever the case may be, then you can do that. But people have property rights, just like you have rights on your property. And you don't want the county coming to tell you what you can and can't do on your property. These people had property rights too, and they wanted to be able to do things on their property. But still, it goes through a process. Nobody was sold out. It wasn't done without anybody. Now, I'm going to say something right here that elected officials and staff don't always say on the microphone. and I'm gonna admit something to you. The early process that we did with getting this through was probably too quiet. And what I mean by that is we weren't hiding anything from anybody. We didn't know. We were learning as we went. We were going on faith. And a lot of you will say, well, that's stupid. Government should never go on faith. Listen, I've never been to heaven. I've never seen heaven. But I believe in a Savior that's going to get me there. And that's blind faith. And we had to have blind faith here in this situation. And we did that. But it was also calculated, and it was also intentional, and we also had more information than the public had. But I do want to say that. I want to say that it was too quiet for a project of that scale. The NDAs, a lot of people talk about NDAs and all the NDAs we signed. We signed one NDA early on with Trammell Crow to not talk about what they were trying to assemble for the site selection or whatever. That was it. We never signed an NDA with Google that I know of. I don't think we ever signed. I didn't sign an NDA with Google, but that's where we were. I mean, it's what we had to do, and it's pretty standard in the industry. It's also true that when the first thing a neighbor hears is a state filing and a rezoning is already on the agenda, trust takes a hit. That no press release is going to be able to repair in a week. Like, wait a minute, whoa, they're shoving this down our throat. Let's get out there, let's talk about it. And you know what? You did get out there and you talked about it, and you got on social media and you showed up, and we heard you. We heard you. We made decisions based on the public outcry and what was going on. So in December 2025, the authority closed the sale. So more than 170 acres in the existing park on Progress Drive, went for a certain amount of money. And then the 1,600 acres went for another certain amount of money. And when everything was said and done, the development authority, ended up, well, I'll tell you what the numbers were: $19 million on the site that they already own, and $59 million plus the carrying costs on the big tract. So, almost $80 million was paid to our development authority on a piece of property that they paid $29 million for. Now, a lot of people say that's a good deal. Some people say, well, it was a dumb deal because Google bought it for more. But remember, the land keeps getting more expensive as things happen. As rural farmland, it was worth $9 million. As a potential development site for houses, it was worth $29 million. For a potential data center, it was worth $80 million. And for a piece of property that was already zoned DC that had the power commitment, it's worth $400 million. I mean, so there's no smoke and mirrors here, folks. This is just the way this thing progressed. All right. So they looked at it. The development authority looked at it. The closing did not by itself approve a building. Zoning still had to run through the county process. The end user still had to come up. We still had to do concept plans. We still had to do engineering. We still had to do environmental. We still had to do all the things that we normally do. So we did that. Cheney Eldridge, our executive director of the Development Authority, she paid off the note. They reimbursed the county for our infrastructure costs on the first site, which was $8.4 million. So they gave the county back. Here's everything you paid into this deal along the way. $8.4 million. We set that aside in an account. It's still sitting in the account, drawing interest. We're going to use that for property tax relief, just as we promised. It's still there. They recovered the attorney's fees. They recovered the interest. And folks, that's how a development authority is supposed to work. That's what's supposed to happen. When the bet pays off, and it did in this case. So what the closing did do was it made the next fight inevitable, because now there was a developer on the ground and a DRO on file and the community that had organized itself. So now we start seeing a lot more public outcry. So let's talk about that. I want to say that citizen concern is not the enemy of the story here. Not at all. You being concerned as a citizen is right. You have the right to be concerned. I think the manner in which you display that concern may be questioned from time to time, because I think there are people that have other motivations out there. I think that data centers may be the argument of the day, but really it's just the battleground on which we choose to fight our fight. A lot of people that are against data centers are against county government. They don't like Columbia County government anyway. A lot of them don't like me personally. So it's a personal thing. So anything I'm for, they're going to be against. You say, well, Scott, that's ridiculous. Nobody would do that. Yes, they do. And they do it for political reasons too. And I'm not going to get into the whole politics here. I try to be as apolitical as possible. But I will ask you a question. If can you ask somebody their political party without asking them their political party? And what I mean by that is say, hey, tell me what your stance is on XYZ. And I'll give it to you. I mean, hey, let's just talk about it. I say we're going to be honest and transparent. If I ask you, what is your stance on abortion? What is your stance on the Second Amendment? What is your stance on books in the library and whether or not they should be censored or not censored? What is your stance on flock cameras? What is your stance on data centers? If you answer those 5 questions for me, I can probably tell you how you vote, if you're honest. Because we've been pre-programmed by our political affiliations, by our algorithms, by the things that we're seeing every day, the news that we're consuming, to be for or against something based on our political ideals. So, folks, this is the political fight too. And for people to say it's not, you're not being honest. You're not being honest with yourself. You're not being honest with others. The reality is you don't like it because you don't like us, or you don't like me, or you don't like government, period, or you don't like the United States. You don't like the governor. You don't like the president. I mean, I could go on and on and on. But we still need to treat citizens as part of the process that produced a better outcome. And you did. So from the late summer 2025 into the winter of 2026, if you came to a planning commission meeting or board of commissioners meeting, you were going to hear about data centers. People stood up and talked about them on and on and on. We had people with signs. We had people chanting. We had people very organized. We had news crews out on the sidewalks here. People were coming out. They were talking about it. They brought up hydrology questions. They brought up property value questions. They talked about wells in Coyote Creek and Halls Branch. We talked about diesel generators, the light at 2 in the morning. You know, what does a $400,000 house look like sitting next to a campus like this? And do we lose property values? Angry citizens were screaming from the back. And one resident even stood up at one point and said, hey, you know, any of you commissioners, would you want one of these next to your own home? Folks, that's not noise. That's self-governance. And Chairman Duncan later wrote that democracy produces friction, and it's supposed to. And Mr. Chairman, I will say that I would agree with you. Democracy does produce fiction, and boy, have we seen our fair share of it here in Columbia County, for sure. So the substance of the concern really fell into 5 buckets, and I'll hit them real quick. You know, one was water. You know, data centers, they run hot, cooling takes water. You know, neighbors on wells wanted to know if it was going to hurt them. You know, 2, power and rates. Nobody in Columbia County wants to subsidize, you know, electric bill for a Fortune 50 company. That's national, not just local fear. Noise and light, you know, rural Columbia County is quiet on purpose. People live out in the country for a reason. I live out that way. I can see every star in the sky. I completely understand what you're saying there. So they said 70 decibels at a property line is like a vacuum cleaner, and living next to a vacuum cleaner is not why people moved to Appling. I get it. Character and a comprehensive plan, Vision 2035, didn't read like an 8 million square foot industrial campus on agricultural land. So residents said that we're rewriting the county story without asking the people that live inside of it what they wanted to do. 5 is the process. You know, you had NDAs. This thing moved way too fast. It should have slowed down. The feeling that the outcome was baked in before the microphone was ever turned on. Not true. We were headed down a path, but it was a path, right? So here's what the county did in response. And it's not a victory lap for us. This is just the record, right? The commission directed staff to write a brand new zoning ordinance from scratch, a DC's data center zoning. We didn't photocopy any other county zoning. We went and looked at it. We looked at a lot of them. We wrote it from scratch. The staff and the development authority, we went and talked to other communities. We went and visited data centers. And we asked 2 questions: what worked, and what do you wish you'd put on paper the first time that you don't have on paper now? And we took all of that into consideration as we were writing our ordinance. It took us a long time to do it. It wasn't something that was done overnight. So now the rule on the books and the conditions attached to what's been approved so far include the following: no wells, period. People worry about your wells in the aquifer. We said none. Operator doesn't get to put a straw in the aquifer. They don't get to use that at all. Cooling is closed loop, which means they're only going to have to energize the system one time. And once they've done that, they just need enough water to flush a few toilets in their building or whatever. It's not 6 million gallons a day anymore. That's already off the table, folks. It's not there. They're using closed loop systems on these first buildings that they're building out there. We know that. We already know it, right? Very minimal water usage. The company, not the ratepayer, is going to pay for the utility upgrades. Everything it costs to run a line from where it is to where they need it, every bit of that, none of that's going to get passed on to the customer. Public Service Commission was clear on that. It's not a suggestion, it's a condition, right? Noise at the property line, it's another one, 70 decibel draft. And then we later said when we did the rezoning, we cut it down to 65 decibels. And in conversations, it even went to 60 decibels. That's not a suggestion. It's written in the ordinance. It's going to be enforced. Buffers went from 250 feet to 500 feet against agriculture and residential edges. We asked them to put in 12-foot berms to build these huge berms so the data centers were sitting kind of in a bowl because you got these berms going around it. We wanted them planted so you couldn't hear, you couldn't see. We wanted to make sure that we protected folks with evergreens. The lighting is shielded and specified. The physical footprint is restricted. Generator testing limited by the hours, and it still has to meet the decibel cap. And then we have a useful end-of-life strategy. If they quit using it for data centers, they have to return the land to its original state. A lot of people saying, well, there's no surety bond for that, so you're not going to make them do those things. I don't really think the data centers are going to go anywhere. I mean, the first data center that was ever put in Loudoun County, Virginia, which is now the data center capital of the world, has been refreshed and is still operating. I can't find a single data center in the United States that's been closed yet, been closed down. So it's probably going to be a while before that happens. Now, was that enough for the people who didn't want data centers here? No. I'm not going to pretend like a burn makes everybody whole. What I will say is the outcry changed the paper. The public input and the ordinance, the ordinance that exists today is based on public input. It's stricter because residents showed up. It's stricter because people spoke out, and we heard their worries and we heard their concerns. So let's talk about the sites. By 2026, there wasn't one proposal. There were three proposals out there. You had White Oak Technology Park, the original campus off of Harlem Appling Highway, which Trammell Crow was working on that deal, right? Later referred to as Project JGK, for those of you that are following along, want to know who's what, right? Pumpkin Center, or also referred to as Project Squash or Pumpkin Center Technology Campus, west of Pumpkin Center neighborhood on Wrightsboro Road. It was a different developer stack, sitting much closer to homes and being sold as rural. So you had Trammell Crow working on White Oak. You had Cloverleaf working on Pumpkin Center. And then you had a local developer working on the Bird Farm site. So by January 2026, Planning Commission sat through 5 hours of meetings. More than 30 people spoke, and they ended up recommending approval of all three of those sites. All three rezonings were coming to us at the same time. February 3rd, 2026, Board of Commissioners didn't rubber stamp that recommendation. They approved White Oak with conditions, okay? They approved Pumpkin Center with conditions, and the 500-foot buffers, 12-foot burns, 65 decibels, all that stuff on the east side of Highway 221, and come back as a PUD amendment with residential uses stripped out. So they made sure that the people that live over there in that Pumpkin Center community are going to get the commercial that they wanted on the other side of the road instead of just more houses that they didn't want. All of those were conditions. And I got to point out here that Vice Chair Allison Couch voted no on Pumpkin Center and Bird. Now, some of you are upset that she voted yes on the White Oak Technology Park. Remember, that was the one the county initiated in the very beginning. We did that for tax relief. She thought there was probably enough, I had a conversation with her, that there was probably enough money for that to only approve that one. Now, later we found out that Google took the Pumpkin Center site and the White Oak site. So that is truly one project on those two pieces of property, even though there were two different developers involved in that. But she voted no on two of the three. Why? Because that's her district. That's who she represents. And she represented her constituents there. She voted the way that her constituents asked her to vote. But she still had enough, I guess, sense about her to be able to at least put some stuff in conditions if she knew she was going to lose the fight. And I don't know if she knew or she didn't know. But again, we were in this. Pumpkin Center and White Oak are now one site. Again, this is part of the story. It didn't start this way. It ended this way. There is one site, one user, even though it's in two locations. And folks, it's not miles and miles and miles apart. The land is actually separated by I-20. And before I-20 was there, the landowner owned land on both sides of the road. Before the road was ever there. So it would have been one contiguous site. Now, is it a long way from one edge to the other edge? Yeah, it sure is, because 1,600 acres is a lot of land. 2,000 acres, 3,000 acres. That's a big site. Take you a long time to get from point A to point B there. But again, it's one project. The Bird project was a separate project. That was a project that was done by local developers, and they were still looking for an end user and may still today be looking for an end user. Not really going to get into that, but I just know that it got voted down because they weren't ready to move forward the way Google was ready to move forward. So when the Bird vote was done, I just want to say, and it was 4-1, Chairman Duncan said, the thing that mattered, we could not find an end user. Completion risk is not a slogan. If you entitle 1,000 acres for a user who did not exist, you've rezoned a countryside for a ghost. Now that sounds like good governance to me. Now I don't know that he's been quoted as saying that, but he said it. But I think we miss that sometimes. And the county's shoving this down our throat. After those votes, we had a citizen file the judicial review, petitions on White Oak and Pumpkin Center, traffic, environment, construction duration, notice to the school district, conflict with the comprehensive plan. That's still in the courthouse, working its way like a courthouse is supposed to work. I'm not going to try this case on the podcast. I will say that the county's position has been that the votes were legal, noticed, and conditioned. We think we did everything right. So, it's just got to run its course. By May of 2026, the land disturbance permits filings were in the state. Turner Construction on the White Oak site. They started land clearing. That's estimated through 2027. Dirt was going to move whether the argument on Facebook was finished or not. So it's happening. What we still did not have in public at that time was a name on the door. So fast forward to July 2026, Chairman Duncan and I were in Washington, D.C., and I want to say that slowly because I've been the county manager of this community for a long time. I've sat in a lot of rooms, but I hadn't sat in that one. I take that back. When the president, actually he was running for president at the time, but when President Trump was here for the hurricane, I had the honor to be able to brief him in a room with him and some other local officials, our chairman and our governor, and introduce our team and all the things we did for hurricane relief. So I had that one-on-one with him. But to have it happen again and be invited to Washington, D.C., to sit just feet from the president as he rolled out his ratepayer protection pledge, that's huge. And what is the ratepayer protection pledge? It's a national commitment that the companies building and running these campuses will cover their own power and their own infrastructure so that a family in Harlem or Martinez or Grovetown or Appling does not find data center and transmission line hiding inside their Georgia Power bill. President laid it right out there for you. It's not going to happen that way. Columbia County was the only local government invited to that stage. Why? Why did Chairman Duncan and I go to Washington, D.C. with the president? Why Columbia County? Not a metro city, not a capital city, a county in East Georgia that decided the only acceptable version of this industry was one that protected the ratepayers and returned value to homeowners in their community. Chairman Duncan and I briefed the president on that approach. We stood with him when the pledge was expanded. The chairman was up on the stage. Governor Kemp was there, part of the broader Georgia conversation that day. Georgia Power's customer protection pledge already said that rates stay stable through 2028 and more than $100 a year of additional savings targeted for a typical residential customer after that. The White House frame, Georgia Power frame, the local frame finally all lined up in the same sentence. They all pay their own way. No smoke and mirrors. We're all saying the same thing. They pay their own way. Same day back at home, the county and the Development Authority announced that what we've been working towards for months, that Google will be the sole end user and operator of the Columbia County Data Center, not a speculative park hoping for a tenant anymore. We're talking about Google. And folks, Google is an amazing company. Like them, don't like them, they are an amazing company. I don't know what their earnings are these days, but I want to say they're close to $1 trillion company. We've talked about what a difference between $1 million and $1 billion is before, but the difference between $1 billion and $1 trillion, they're huge. And if we're going to have a partner, we might as well have the best or one of the best. And I think that's what happened here. Campus, not a single building, a full build out. We're looking at both White Oak and the Pumpkin Center site to be built out in the order of 20 to 30 buildings. We don't know exactly what the build out looks like yet. We just know that it's going to be built, and it's going to be one of the largest data center projects in the country by land and by building count. We know that. Construction jobs are measured in the thousands over the life of that build. A local hiring commitment and talent pipeline conversation with our schools, Augusta Tech and Fort Gordon, have already begun because a project of this size doesn't just touch our own kids. I mean, this is generations of stuff that's happening. Google committed to paying 100% of the energy costs associated with the project. Utility ratepayers are contractually and politically protected from infrastructure, transmission, and capacity costs. That pledge is made local. We know that. The development covenants that we announced, Google and Georgia Power, the ones that we walked through a minute ago, now sitting on top of a named operator with a balance sheet that has the ability to do the things we're talking about. And you know what? They have to live with non-negotiable decibel limits, lighting standards, minimal visibility, water protections, and end of life. Chairman Duncan's line that day is still the right one. This partnership represents months of collaboration to ensure Columbia County remains a great place to live while planning responsibility for the future. That's exactly what happened. I want to credit some people that made that work, right? Because the county manager didn't deliver a project like this by himself. The economic development director didn't deliver a project like this by herself. This is everybody working together. I want to call it out again. Governor Brian Kemp has done amazing things for Georgia. Governor, thank you for your service to our state. Thank you for being an amazing Georgian. And thank you for making Georgia what it is today. And I appreciate your leadership on this as well. So if you're listening, job well done, sir. Public Service Commissioner Tricia Pridemore. We've had lots of conversations with Tricia. She's going to be stepping aside from the Public Service Commission soon, replaced by a great man, Stan Wise, I believe has been tapped to take that over. Stan's a great man. I think he'll do great things on the Public Service Commission. The rest of our members on our Public Service Commission are doing a great job for us. Speaker John Burns, again, helping us with our legislation is huge. Speaker Burns, thank you so much for your commitment to Columbia County and our state. All of our representatives, specifically Senator Anderson, Lee Anderson, and Gary Richardson, but all of our delegation, everybody on our delegation, Senator Max Burns, Representative Rob Clifton, Representative Rob Leverett, Representative Dr. Mark Newton. We have an amazing delegation here in Columbia County. They do great work for us, and we appreciate them very much. Development Authority, Executive Director Cheney Eldridge and Chairman Rick Evans. Again, great job. And then folks here, Vice Chair Allison Couch, Commissioners Connie Malier, Mike Caraway, Jim Steed, and Chairman Duncan, who has said from day one that homestead relief was the point, not the press conference. You know, all those people I just named have provided some bold leadership in some pretty hard times. But we did it for a specific purpose. Standing on that stage did not settle every argument that's happening out there in 221. It did something else. It told the rest of the country that a local government can demand ratepayer protection, demand design standards, and still land a user of Google scale. Okay? But that's only the first half of the story, and I know we're way into the show now, but we're going to keep going. And again, if you don't want to listen to it, you can fast forward through it. You can stop. But I'm sure that some of you want to hear all of this. How we got the land, how the public fought the terms, how the terms got better, how Google arrived with a ratepayer pledge in hand. That's all the first part. The second half is why any of that was worth the scar tissue that we have right now. I've used this analogy before, and I'm going to use it again because it's one of the clearest one that I have. Imagine you sit down in a very nice restaurant. The check comes, it's a $1,000 check. You had a very, very nice meal. All right? It's $1,000. That's your assessed value minus your exemptions times the millage rate. Okay, so it's equal to your tax bill. But let's just say that's what it was. All right. What we're building is a world in which somebody else picks up that check. The receipt still shows that you have something due, or what it would have been. You see the number for transparency purposes. You also see the credit for your homestead bill. And for county purposes, that goes towards zero. We want to get it all the way down to zero. So essentially, this is somebody else just picking up your check. Instead of picking up your check in a restaurant, they're going to pick up your tax bill. You say, well, Scott, that's not going to happen. You know, there's not enough money. I'm getting there, I promise you. A lot of places can say that they want to do something like that, but I don't think anybody in this country has actually done it. And we're trying to do it here in Columbia County. To get there, we needed three things. We need a legal vessel in state law. Got it. House Bill 439. We need a constitutional change that remove the cap. Not there yet, but we're working on that now. And we needed a revenue stream large enough and early enough so we weren't asking homeowners to wait until the last building was powered in the 2030s before they got tax relief. So let's take those in order. House Bill 439, we've talked about it a lot. Great tool. Our commission asked for it. Representative Richardson authored it. Senator Anderson carried it in the Senate. Vice Chair Couch and Chairman Duncan both worked this. I was in Atlanta a lot working this bill. We got it done. All the trips to Atlanta paid off. Governor Kemp signed it into law in May of 2026. Here's what it does without all the legal fog. Basically, it lets the county, Georgia law lets us roll back the millage rate, but we don't want to roll back the millage rate because we want our data centers to pay their fair share. So we want to levy a tax. But what we did was we said, hey, if there's windfall from an economic development project like we're going to see with Google in Columbia County, we could use that to establish a homestead tax relief grant. What House Bill 439 is, it does that. It doesn't raise a tax. It doesn't cut public safety. It doesn't require us to lower the millage rate to zero and then hope the next recession is kind to us. It creates a grant against the bill you already know and you owe. You still see the calculation. You see the credit. They pick up your check. That's what House Bill 439 does. And it's statewide on purpose. Columbia County didn't want to just do this for Columbia County. We wanted any county in Georgia that landed a big enough project to be able to do this. We wrote it that way because the Georgia Constitution does not love one-off favors. And because it's the right answer that anybody should be able to give this thing a shot. Here's the catch. I'm not going to hide it. Stand the program up here, Columbia County voters have to authorize it. You'll see it on the November ballot. You have to vote for House Bill 439. And if you do that, we will be able to establish a homestead tax relief grant. We will be able to use any surplus funds we have to be able to fund that. And we're going to have some surplus funds. Talk about it in a minute. Based on the 2025 budget, the county's property tax share for the whole operation is in the neighborhood of that 40%. People have thrown a number around like $160 million. If a campus of that scale was ever, if you would have to have a campus of that scale to be able to cover that. You need $160 million. I'm not promising you a headline number today that the assessor has not signed, and what I am going to do is promise you the mechanism. The mechanism says that we can deliver property tax relief if we have the funding available, and we're going to have the funding available. And I'm going to tell you how in just a minute. The voters say yes. Our target relief is a credit on the 2027 bill before even a building is probably built out there. We're going to go ahead and start tax relief in Columbia County before a server's ever out there working. Year one relief, not a ribbon cutting promise dated in 2032. We say, okay, hey, we've been waiting all this time. Now you can get some tax relief. But that's the vessel, but it's not enough to get us to zero. The other part that we need, that we've talked about a lot, is the constitutional amendment. It puts a cap. The Constitution puts a cap on how much we can give back to our taxpayers. We're going to go back in the next session. We're going to ask for that cap to be removed. Hopefully, if 439 passes, we can go ahead and fully fund our tax relief grant so I can go to the legislature and say, look, we have millions of dollars sitting in the bank we want to give back to our taxpayers. I just need a constitutional amendment to get it done. And hopefully they'll hear us. And the people that I named right here are firmly behind us. So hopefully we can get that done. We want to take it all the way back to zero. So if that happens, we get a constitutional amendment. It's going to take a while. So think about this. November 2026, voters decide whether you want House Bill 439. 2027, if they do, credits start landing on the county homestead bills and all the revenue we can legally apply. 2028 and beyond, hopefully we have a constitutional amendment in 27. We can take to the voters on the ballot in 2028. And if the people of Georgia ratify that, the cap comes off and we eliminate the county homestead tax. And it stops being a goal and becomes a line on a bill. The credit, a line on the bill. You owe, your credit is, your new balance is zero. It's the only reason we did this. And anybody that tells you that we can't zero a bill without the amendment is not reading the Constitution the same way that I am. We cannot zero the bill without a constitutional amendment. Right? We know that. All right? So here's the Google deal that you really haven't heard in full. A little, I would say, new information that is just now coming out based on the Development Authority's recent action that they just took. In Georgia, when a community wants to put a major capital project on competitive footing, we don't hand the company a check. Okay, gratuities are illegal in the state of Georgia. We can't hand them a gratuity. Okay. So we use the Development Authority, and the Development Authority has the legal ability to issue bonds and hold title to the property for a period of time. So what they will do is they'll go out and issue these bonds for the company, and they'll be tax-exempt bonds because they'll be done by a government entity, so it saves them money on that side. And then the Development Authority will hold the title to the land for a period of time, because if the Development Authority holds the land or the title for the land, then the taxes are less. And so this is called a bond for title structure in Georgia. It's how it's done in industrial recruitment for a generation. It's not a secret handshake. It's state law, very much above board. So under that structure, the project will receive standard abatements that Columbia County already publishes for data centers. Now, let me stop right there for just a second. I want to pause, because you said no abatement, Scott, and this is another bait and switch. Folks, the Development Authority has standard abatements that they've had in place before I was county manager, before any sitting commissioner was here. We were very clear that the Board of Commissioners was not going to raise their hand to vote for any additional abatements for this project. We were very clear, and they have not. The Board of Commissioners has not done that. The Development Authority has a standard abatement schedule that says this has been approved and we can give them this. If we hold the bond for title, then we can do this. So the Board of Commissioners didn't have an extra vote. There weren't any one-off abatements, on top of the standard schedule. Google is getting the standard deal that any qualified project would have gotten in Columbia County. But what we negotiated, and this is the part that is new, is what happens to the money that the bond structure itself generates. And I think that's the part that people may be missing. When the Development Authority issues the bonds and holds title, there's bond issuance fees, okay? In a lot of communities, those fees sit at the authority and they get used for the next spec building or whatever it is. And they never touch a homestead bill. We negotiated a different outcome in Columbia County. So what will happen here is Google's going to make payments to the Development Authority on the bond fee, which is standard in the state of Georgia. And it's in the millions of dollars. It's over $40 million that they're going to pay starting in year one to the Development Authority. Now, the Development Authority is going to keep some of that money, and they're going to do Development Authority projects. But we have entered into an intergovernmental agreement with the Development Authority that will allow the majority of those funds, nearly $40 million of those funds for the first 7 years, to be sent directly to the county. Now, we're going to use that for economic development purposes in our budget. But the whole idea is, if you go back to House Bill 439, the only way to be able to use or to fund our homestead tax relief grant is to have excess revenue. To have excess revenue, it means it has to run through our budget. So we're going to run that $40 million through our budget, and then at the end of the year, whatever we have left over, which in essence will be all of this $40 million plus some, because we always underspend our budget, we can then fully fund the homestead tax relief grant. Well, Scott, how much do you need? Well, for the county, we need $25 million. And we're going to get $40 million in year one. And remember, we don't have a constitutional amendment, so we can't even spend the whole $25 million yet. We're going to give you back everything we can give you back by law. But what's going to happen to the money? The money's going to sit there. And then next year, we're going to fund it again. And then the next year, we're going to fund it again. And then the next year, we're going to fund it again. And by the end of this 25-year cycle on this bond structure deal, the county will have gotten over $300 million in fees to help us with our tax relief on the front side, and over $4 billion in taxes. $4 billion in taxes. That's enough to run the county government, completely run the county government, everything we do here on the general fund side, for 40 years. That's what this one project on 3% of our land is going to produce. Over $4 billion in tax revenue, even after we've talked about standard abatements. And outside of that, they're going to pay fees that we're going to get day one, so we can provide your property tax relief in 2027 as promised. We're going to be able to do that before they even build the first building. We're not even going to wait for the first building to be built and the tax money not be enough to cover what we said we were going to do. We're going to fully fund tax relief in year one, just like we promised we were going to do. So it doesn't matter that it's not finished. It doesn't matter that it's not built out. We're projecting this, but we know that we're going to have enough money in the fees to make good on our promise to reduce and eliminate, hopefully, your property taxes in Columbia County. Now, I want to say one more thing about abatements, because this is where good faith skeptics and bad faith Facebook posts tend to meet. An abatement on a multi-$100 billion campus is not the same thing as they pay nothing. I can promise you that. The building still generates activity. The equipment still arrives. The power is still paid at 100 cents on the dollar. The infrastructure upgrades are on their tab. The fee structure we negotiated is specifically designed to replace for the public the value of the abatement that would otherwise be parked on the sideline until these things got built out. We're not pretending the standard abatement doesn't exist. We're filling a hole so that it creates so the homestead owner is not the person who funds the initiative, or the incentive rather, who funds the incentive. We don't want the homeowner funding this in any way, shape, or form. We want you to participate in it and get something out of it. So that's the deal. That's what makes growth work for the residents. When you take it off the press relief and you put it in the closing binder, this is what we need. We're doing this for our residents here. Okay. So what does it mean on your street? If you live 3 parcels off the buffer line out in the Appling area, we've not forgotten you. A credit on your tax bill doesn't change the view from your back porch. And if the berm's not built and the decibel cap's not enforced, I get all that. So here's my commitment as a county manager, and it'll be my commitment the commitment of the staff after I'm gone from here. We will enforce the ordinance that we wrote. 65 decibels is not a vibe. No wells means no wells. Closed loop means closed loop. Lighting stays down. Construction traffic uses the exits that were put on the plans. If a condition is on the page, it's exactly what will be on the inspection list. So if there's a condition there, we're going to inspect it for that. If you live anywhere in the county in your homestead, on your house, here's the ask. Read the November ballot measure. It's 439 authorization is the difference between a fund that we can fill and a fund that we can only talk about. Talk to your school board too, because the amendment that we still need is how their millage rate is in the same. The amendment that we need is something they need too. So the school board's going to have to go back. They're going to have to use their lobbyists, and they're going to have enabling legislation and constitutional amendment as well. We want to be able to provide complete tax relief for everybody, and quite frankly, with what we negotiate and the amount of money we have coming in, we could do an intergovernmental agreement with the school board and potentially help them out with their taxes as well. So the money's there, folks. The money is there. It has been discussed, it has been negotiated, and it's happening. It's there. So if you oppose the project from the first DRI, I'm not going to ask you to like the project. I'm going to ask you to hold us to the bargain, which is homestead property tax relief. Protecting our ratepayers, water protected, noise capped, visibility limited. If any one of those breaks, you won't need to have to find a podcast to find me. I'm still going to be living in this community. You can run me down. We are not selling out. We are not selling out our county. So let me land this where I started. The Development Authority bought the land so Columbia County would own its future instead of renting it. Okay. The public made us write a better ordinance, one that we drafted better than the one we drafted the first time. The commission approved 2 sites that became one project, and at that time killed a third because they couldn't show an end user. Google puts its name on the door. Chairman Duncan stood on the stage with the President of the United States, the only local government in the room, and said that the county could protect its ratepayers and still win the project. House Bill 439 gave us a vessel. The Constitution still has to move, and the bond fee deal with Google is how we put the money in general fund early enough to keep the promise. That's the data center story in Columbia County. It's not tidy, and it's not finished, and there were a lot of mistakes along the way, but you know what? It's our story. Ours, mine, and yours if you live in Columbia County. Again, I know my detractors are going to say, you know what, that was just a waste of my time. I can't believe I listened this long for that. Folks, it's happening. The money's been negotiated. The vessel is there. Promises made are promises kept. And to say anything else, you're just simply not telling the truth. You're creating fear. You're creating speculation. You're not being truthful. Everything that I just told you here today, you can fact check it. It's the truth. And it's where we are. It's where we are as a society, and it's where we are as a community. And remember, if not here, somewhere, at least we benefited in some way, shape, or form. So as promised, here's how we end our episodes. The most ridiculous thing that I've heard lately, and I'm going to go back to, I think I've already said this, but I'm going to say it again because I heard it again last week, that there are data centers being proposed all over Columbia County. Absolutely ridiculous. First of all, we have not had a single data center brought back to us since we voted on the last data centers for rezoning. Not even one. Not even one. Not even the one that was rejected. So for somebody to tell you that there's a data center being planned, for the Riverwood area or for the Grovetown area, or I've heard on Gordon Highway, I've heard, by Westlake, all these things that I'm hearing, it's not true. Nothing's been brought to us like that. It's absolutely not true. As a matter of fact, we have commissioners actively working on moratoriums and changes to our ordinance because they feel like we've been able to achieve tax relief on the first data centers. I don't know what that means for our community. I don't get a vote, but I know for a fact that they're working on moratoriums and they're working on not having any more data centers in Columbia County. And again, what we have that's going to produce millions or billions of dollars for Columbia County is on 3% of our land with protections in place to be able to protect those that live anywhere near it. And for all of you that are out there researching data centers, you find all the bad things about it, check your algorithm. Folks, we are in a society where news comes to us in the manner in which we choose it or we want it. And if you want a certain perspective, your algorithm will eventually catch up to that perspective. That's all you'll ever get. So you're being fed the information you're being fed because it's what you desire. It's not an objective look. And even on the other side, if you're pro data center, all the information you're getting is based on your algorithm pro data center, so all you're getting is good information. That's why everybody's so frustrated with everybody. It's like everything I research is terrible. Well, everything I research is positive. Why is that? It's the nature of the beast. But to think that we're going to sell Columbia County out to be a data center community or be the Loudoun County of the South is absolutely ridiculous and false. I can just go ahead and tell you, there's no truth to it. So thank you for listening to this episode of the County Compass. If you have questions about anything you've heard today or anything else county related, you can visit our website, reach out to our Public Relations Director, Cassidy Harris, or myself. If you ever have any questions, we're very glad to answer those for you. This wraps up the episode of the County Compass. If you enjoyed it, we ask you to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Leave us a review. More importantly, thank you for tuning in and being an engaged part of our community. And here in Columbia County, your input participation makes our county stronger. Stay safe, stay involved, and keep loving this county as much as I do. Take care.
This has been the County Compass, Columbia County's guide to news, voices, and perspectives. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you taking the time to stay informed about the issues, initiatives, and people impacting our community. And we sincerely hope today's conversation helps you better understand the work being done in Columbia County. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. As always, visit Columbia County's official website or social media channels for additional information. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.